Hello, everybody. Thanks for the nice introduction, Dominic. Oh, I'm not here yet. I'm too, too short. Okay, sorry. It's okay. Yeah, reuse build materials. So today I will show a little bit the history where I come from. So I'm with Bauweisen in situ now for a number of years, and the Bauweisen in situ has a long history in let's say reuse. So reuse for us is happening on several levels. So we can reuse whole. Let's try this here. Whole sites, like whole areas, whole parts, big parts of town. It can also we can also talk about reuse when we change existing buildings. And here I think it's important to not just look at buildings that are somehow fancy and attractive to us, but also just really look at the buildings that are maybe not fancy enough yet for us to be received as something we should keep, like let's say buildings from the 80s or 90s. We can also reuse building components. So this is a view on the upper right here. This is a view into our office. We have built this piece of furniture that is from existing storage, like racking system in an industrial hall, and we made this like interior furniture where we have now 10 people sitting and working. And then at the very least, we can also talk about reuse on a straight out material level. So today I will talk about reusing building components and materials. So I knew that Axel will be talking in the morning. So I knew he will have said a lot of things regarding CO2 and so on. And we have a lot of different reasons why we should change from a linear to like a circular economy. And so I'm just picking out one aspect today. And I like sometimes to get things, you know, physical, just to try to understand it. So this is me, and I'm about 60 kilograms in weight, about. Now, I reproduce myself. So assuming that I'm a standard person living in Switzerland, I reproduce myself about 12 times yearly in the amount of trash I'm producing. So in the pure weight, it's about every person produces about 715 kilograms of household trash. So that is really the trash we produce in our kitchens or here in the lobby or like in some office buildings. Some of this does go into recycling, but this is something that's kind of close to us, and something that's more a bit in the hidden is the amount of deconstruction material that we have in Switzerland per person and year. So it's about 2,000 kilograms yearly per person deconstruction material. That's quite three times the amount of household trash, but it's not so many people know about this. And a lot of this goes into recycling, luckily, but there's still a lot of mass, pure mass, that just goes into the landfill or into the incinerator. So 10 times me in my weight yearly per person goes to waste. Now, this is something that of course is the end of the pipe, you know, stuff goes out, but then obviously something comes in on the other side. And we heard a lot this morning about equity and just this imbalance of consumerism and where things come from. And yeah, so there is a few of me here. When we look at the mass of how much raw material an individual person consumes yearly, and that is biomass, and it's also mineral and oil, a lot of oil for our mobility. And about 40% of this is going into construction. So about bit more than 40% of these 17 tons goes into the construction sector. I find this quite crazy, you know, just to kind of imagine it and try to like get your hands on this. We basically then said, okay, this is just impossible, right? It just can't go on like that. This is just, it's just in front of your eyes. This is just no way we can continue. And so we started to look at what can we do to basically reuse material and building components on a big scale. So we have done this as Baubüro in situ for a long time. You know, we have Barbara Buser, she has founded the Bauteilbörsen, and they always salvaged materials for like decades. And we always try to use them in our projects. And now it was more like, okay, there's just, in Switzerland, it's like, you know, if you want to reuse material, it's like paradise, right? You only take the low-hanging fruits. There's just a few things you take. There's just so much. It's really a question of demand at this point. So you could really, by creating, let's say, more demand, you could actually, at this point in time, salvage a lot of things that go to waste. So the first project we did is here in Basel. And this is about, we're talking here about this facade. And this is basically you know, a reuse structure. So it was a co-op. It was like a store, like a bakery, a very big bakery, 80 meters by 80 meters. And because of changes in the city and changes of owner and so on, a section of the building got taken back. So they cut out a bit of the roof, and then there was an opening. And so we had to make a wall to close that opening. And so we were then saying, okay, we would like to do that with reused material. And then there was mediocre excitement on the other side there. And we just had, you know, to convince, if I can say that, we have to convince the owner that we can just try it, you know, we can just try. We don't know, we have actually no clue what we're going to find and where and how much and what, but why not just try it? And yes, it's a lot of square meters, but why not just try? And then we can always fill up with new stuff at the other end if we don't find enough. So first place where we looked was right on site, and we had on site a number of materials that we just reused. So we reused all of these green sheet metals. They were on top of the building. They had, and on top of the building was just like some housing for like mechanical units. So they had to be taken down because the interior of the building changed and they needed new mechanical systems. So we took those down and then put them right back on the building. And we also took other like little, you know, metal things from the roof and put them in front of the windows and so on. So we looked, first thing, we looked really on site, what is there. And then we also looked at nearby deconstruction. So there was a fire in the harbor in Basel, and we could then salvage all these, not all of them, but a lot of the wood beams that were still there. And then we used those as basically to make these wood frames for this facade. So the facade is like made out of wood elements. And so we could salvage a section of a part of these beams to go into this new facade. We also looked for windows. We had, the owner was not willing to accept used windows, in the sense that they were not willing to accept windows that have already been installed in another building somewhere else. So we were looking for new windows that are basically around. And so we started calling up window manufacturers that are in a certain area around Basel, like about 50 to 100 kilometers, just on the Swiss side, and asked them if they have windows that they have manufactured wrong. And now this is something that happens all the time. Somebody measures wall in the, a hole in the wall wrong, and then they make windows and they are just 2 centimeters too wide. Or they make a few extra because, if one breaks and then you have to wait weeks and weeks, and that doesn't work with the flow of the construction site. So they just, from the beginning, they produce a few extra and so on. So these manufacturers that we called more than willing to give them to us or sell them to us, because usually they end up in the trash because they're standing around and they're in the way. So in a very shocking short amount of time, we collected over 200 brand new windows that we then took as the basis of our design. And so we created this wood element structure that can then hold all these different sizes of windows. So it looks like that. This goes over 2 stories, and we made this wood frame. And then we also looked at insulation material. We're like, can we find insulation material? So we started calling up the guys who we work with in some projects that do the facades and the insulation. We said, hey, why don't you guys start collecting the bits and pieces and ends of insulation material that you always, you cut off, right? Because these insulation sheets, like in this case, it's rock wool, they come in certain standard sizes, then they put them on the wall, and then there's always but then there's some left over that then gets cut off. And so that, we always have that discussion in the beginning, this doesn't make any sense, it's way too expensive, you're not going to save anything. Yeah, it's not about that, look, it's about this and that. So after many discussions, you can then convince the people to do that. So he started collecting that for us, but then we realized, oh man, we need 40 cubic meters of insulation, and this is really not gonna happen in time. So we tried something else, and we
Habe ich etwas gemacht?
This stuff go. And so what's happening is that when you have either new or clean pieces and bits of rock wool, they sometimes go back to the manufacturer, which is Flumrock in this case. So we called him up and said, look, you get all this material back. We would like to test this and to put that into our facade here. So he agreed, and he sold us these leftover pieces that usually then get heated up again to over 1,000 degrees and get melted, and then it's another new material, which is cool if that happens, because most of this stuff actually does end in the landfill if it's a little bit dirty. Anyway, so we tried this, and then we also added like granulate in order to make sure that it's all nice and stacked, so that we don't have any problems from the building physics side. So that was the insulation. Yeah, and then you just basically, you add a lid, so to say, and then it's like the standard procedure. It gets, you make these elements, and then this facade was actually built in 3 days. Yeah, and that's how it looks now. So we did take materials from site. We took materials within a reasonable radius, and also materials just from very, very close by, which is this material here on top. Oops, like this beige stuff. This is really 130 meters in distance, we got that. There was another building taken down, the old Weinlager in the co-op in Basel, and we dismantled these big metal sheets and basically with a little wagon just kind of rolled them over to our construction site. That was the first big move. And now the second move that we did there, that was even more radical. This is a building we've just finished in Winterthur. So we're talking here about these 3 stories, these this addition here in Orange. It's basically about 1,500 square meters of Verwaltung, so office and artists' spaces that we added to this existing structure here on the Lagerplatz in Winterthur. And here it was a bit of a different story in the sense that the building owner really wanted that. Like the building owner, they said, okay, we really want to see how far we can go making new construction by using materials from local deconstruction. The only thing was there that made it a bit hard for us was that it was not supposed to be more pricey than a new construction, which makes sense for the owner because they are a pension fund and they basically have to, you know, they cannot just kind of spend money like that. They have some responsibility there. So we said, okay, we'll try it. And it was a lot of time on our side that made up for this, that we could do it on a, let's say for the owner on a financial level that is comparable to new construction. So we've just actually published a whole book about this. There's a lot of information in here and I'm going to leave it here. So whoever's interested can maybe borrow it from the library. In the end, when what we would say now is that you can, with reusing material, depends on how, you know, on the exact thing, but in general, we would say now you can do it for the same amount as new construction, but it needs more work in the planning. So if you find an owner that's willing to come up with a bit of extra money for the planning process, and we actually compare it to a planning process in an existing structure. It's like very similar, right? You have an existing structure. So you look at the existing structure, you look at the conditions that are there and what the building can do, what it cannot do. And this type of thinking, you just have to take and then use that on working with existing components and material. So you also have to look at what's there, what can it do, what is its capacity. And then with this little extra care, you can then work and make something that's really not that much more or not more expensive than any other new construction. Anyways, back to this building. So yeah, that was the task, you know, make something new out of local deconstruction, which was also just crazy. If you would know, like it was just in the Sulzer Burkhardt areal and there was so much stuff taken down that it almost seemed like a joke that you couldn't find the material to make this small, as in this case, compared to what's been taken out to a small little addition there. But still, we didn't really know where to even, you know, how do you approach it, right? Like, where do you start? What do you find? So we had several ideas, you know, how can it look like? What do we want? What's out there? How do others do it? And so on. And then at the same time started to look for material. And then you also have a certain requirements, right? I mean, it has a certain usage. So that usage comes with a certain set of requirements. And so in this mix, step by step, we basically developed the design and the building of the building and the choice, like the choosing of the parts and the components. We started right at the bones. So we went into the structure. We found this structure, funny enough, in our first project that I presented you. So we were on site in Basel, and then we saw, oops, there's this whole building taken down, 17 years old. Yeah, it's not taken down because some of the material isn't working anymore. Something else. It was a city planning reason that this building had to go. And so we went in there very quickly and kind of looked at all the beams and so on, found a structural engineer that would evaluate with us, evaluate this, if this actually works for the Winterthur project. And so it did. And so in the end, we just took also there just a section of what would have been available and took this for the project in Winterthur. And this was then basically the shape. Like this really determined more or less the shape of this addition that we then made. There was also another deconstruction, 15 years old, from a temporary building, and they deconstructed the whole exterior. And so they had these panels that were basically wood and then insulation and then wood. And so we could just take these whole elements, and then they were not according to the current building code. And so this was another challenge, right? You go into the Energiefachstelle and you say, look, we want to make a building out of reused material. And no, we don't really know how it's going to look like yet, because we don't know what we're going to find yet. And then they're like, well, using reused material, yes, it does save embodied energy and carbon and so on in the production, but not necessarily in running the building, and it might even be the opposite. So don't you even think you have to do anything less than a new construction and the classic standard. Okay. So with them, we then said, okay, we agreed on a way how we can do this, and the way it works is basically in Switzerland you have a Systemnachweis, that's how it's called. So you can, for example, for the energy code, you have to either prove when you build something new or when you change something, you have to prove, oh yeah, this window is good enough, and the wall is good enough, and the ceiling is good enough, and the floor is good enough, and fulfill these individual numbers. Or you can say, look, I look at this building as a whole, and if my window isn't good enough, I can just make the ceiling a bit better as long as the whole system functions. And so that's the way we approached it. We said, okay, look, we go with this we look at the whole building as a system, and we say it's about this amount of window surface, and it's about that quality of window. And then that means that results that we need that quality for the wall. And so this was also sort of a rolling process, and just kind of going back and forth and then saying, yeah, okay, if I'd find windows that are not good enough, maybe I just need a bit less window surface. As long as it's within a reasonable range, you actually do have quite a tolerance. You have a playing field in which we as planners can play. Okay, so here we didn't fulfill the code for this roof, so we added another set of insulation on top. Then it worked. This is also the facade is also a wood element, and this is actually works quite well. We've seen this in the project before. It's like, if you don't know exactly what window dimensions you have, it's very good to combine that with a system that can sort of, shrink and grow and shrink a little bit. So wood construction is actually quite good, because you can just then shift the wood beams in there. Now, we work with reused materials. So here we see the wood, a lot of the wood is reused, the window is reused, the whole structure is really reused. We try to combine with harmless material in the sense of ecological impact. So we combined, in this case, with straw bale. And we tried to combine with clay. So we were in contact with the ETH, with the Oxara, and tried to find a for the estrich, like for that concrete coating, we were trying to do that with clay, but unfortunately the product development wasn't there. So it's really changing the type of material we have. Is a lot of this is also bound to research and cycles, and a lot of products are simply not available yet.
Jetzt nicht mehr.
Sorry, the research isn't there yet. So yeah, maybe also buying some time is a good thing, and speeding up the research and the project development, the material development. Oops. Oh, now it worked. So this is another picture from the inside. So then we added clay to the straw bale. So the straw in itself is very good material to just hold the plaster, like the clay on it. We also reused the radiators there, and because there was not the size that we wanted, we just put two on top of each other so we can achieve the required warmth. And then the wood wall, these are wood planks they do come from event halls. You know, often you have event spaces and they have floors like these, and then they have these wood planks that we just took and sanded and used as interior walls. Then also here the attempt in this so-called design for disassembly. So we have the materials are combined such that you can take them apart again. And the wood planks here that this guy is putting down, they really come from in Winterthur, the other side of the railroad track. There was several housing units dismantled, and we salvaged the floor there. This is the facade. So the facade is these metal sheets are also taken one-to-one from a deconstruction close by. And here we came up with a system where we can actually stack them. We can layer them so that we don't need to cut them. Because you were in Switzerland, you have very high labor costs. So any material that you're cutting or working with, the price immediately goes up. So it's really the approach is to use materials as they are as much as we can without trying to change them or adapt them. Yeah, so there's these two types of windows that we use. So one of them, these larger ones, they come from a building in Zurich that has been dismantled after 28 years. And these were one of the first triple glazed windows, very high quality aluminum, thermally separated aluminum windows, triple glazed. And the other ones, the ones with the little squares, these are actually industrial windows that come straight from that site. And with the first windows, we were able to make measurements while they were still in use. So we knew about the energetic value that they have, and we could then convince the city of Winterthur that this is basically the number we take into our energetic calculations. And the other ones, they were clearly, old windows, they were clearly not according to standards. So we basically upgraded them such that we doubled them up. So it's like a modernes Kastenfenster. So it's just a double window that then in the sum actually works out again. And these windows, you will recognize in our next project, because we've inherited our own windows in our next project. And we've heard a lot this morning about the nest. So I'm not going to talk much about this anymore. The only thing is that I can only say I was really happy when I got a call at the end of last year from a person from the nest saying, look, we have an idea. We have COVID, and we would want a unit in our nest that gives us COVID-safe workspaces that then can be like individual workspaces for all the people that are in the home office now, and that these workspaces can be turned into more communal spaces or bigger units when COVID is gone or under control or however. And they also wanted it to be really fast. They wanted it to be faster than COVID. So they said, you should be done in 6 months. And they said, and we also want it all to be reused material or secondary material. They saw the unit as a follower of the urban mining unit that was presented earlier today. The urban mining unit, they made these new products out of waste. And here the idea was to basically, as much as we can, take things one-to-one and put them in there. And the overlying goal was also to do these life cycle analysis and just see, have a better understanding of the footprint of reused materials. So this is basically a floor plan of this structure that we saw before. These outer lines are these concrete slabs that go out. And what we see here in red, this is the unit that we built. So it's 12 individual units, and every other wall you can take out. So I don't know, this thing is a bit slow. This one you can take out, and this one you can take out. Anyways, every other wall you can dismantle. They had the worry that we won't be able to find the material in time, 6 months. So I gave them a link to our internal Bautile shop and just showed them all the stuff that's just basically there or that we still have from other projects left over. And then that worry was gone immediately. And then also we tried to include them, because this is what I think is a clever strategy. You have to work with your, with the folks around you. So we said to them, well, what do you have? Like, you're the EMPA. What material do you have? What can you give us to work with? And also then they are in the city of Dübendorf. So then they helped us get in contact with 2 building owners that are actually two big buildings that are about to be taken down in Dübendorf. So they put a word in for us there. So with them, actually with the EMPA together, we went and did what we call Bauteljägerei, building component hunting with the guys from the EMPA. So that was quite fun. So that was the design that we made. So on the left, you see this individual unit with this blue greenish wall there that is then can actually be taken out, and then it's like a longer unit. So all the stuff on the ceiling is just the COVID conform Lüftungsanlage, like ventilation system. There was no way around those, not even operable windows. That wouldn't be enough, so it had to be they wanted this ventilation system. And the windows you can maybe recognize. These are the ones from Winterthur that we had left over. And the interior doors on the left, they're actually from a site in Basel that is taken down, that we got from there. But first of all, we got the wood, and that brings me back to something else I'd like to say. So we heard that before, the EMPA, they like also to look at the process, different processes. And so our unit was IPD, Integrated Process Delivery test run, which means that the idea there is that when you have an architectural project, you actually try to cooperate with the other people rather than being, on the right side and the other guy did the mistake. So we were, because it was also such a short time frame, we were allowed to bring in people or suggest people that we would like to work with. And so we could suggest people that we had worked with before, and we knew that they have the same caring for material, the same mindset as we do. And so the guy who did the wood construction, he brought in his own wood from a deconstruction that they were involved in. So they gathered all that wood. And then it was a great opportunity for us to experiment and test. So we actually reused our own facade systems that we had developed in these previous projects. We reused them, and then here we put in other rock wool. This is rock wool from the EMPA itself. We put in straw bale again, and then aerogel. That's like a deal that the EMPA wanted to test. So we did the same facade and added these different insulation materials, and we can now test and measure and understand the results of these different insulation methods. And then we also could do something else. We have a while back, we have internally developed a wall, an interior wall that is made from sections that are basically leftover bits and pieces from wood module construction. So they make all these wood modules, you know, and they always use Fermacell, and they always use these Dreischichtplatten, these like wood planks. There's always bits and pieces left over that get trashed. And so at some point we said, can we not just with these material come up with a system that you could do, you know, you could just do a lot of them. If you come up with a system that fulfills the current requirements for fire and for sound, why not? So we had this in our drawer, and we were never able to build it before, but then at the EMPA, we were able to actually test that and build it there. This is now an image from the Zimmerei, from the wood shop there. So you see the wall that's made out of these elements, and then you see the windows that are reused, and that whole frame is basically these cut up wood beams that we got, that you saw in the beginning, and the insulation and so on, that's from the EMPA. And then we made these little elements, these little boxes, and just kind of stacked them in there. So the lower one there now, not the fancy tall ones, but the lower row there, that's us. And all these windows are basically the inherited windows from the previous project. And now there is also here was material to be salvaged from the site itself. We love that the most. So on the backbone, we heard that before, the backbone was covered with insulation and with black wood panels. So we just took that and just moved that outside basically to our thing. So that's our facade. And then the EMPA also had some PV systems that they have tested. And so we took those too. And now we have 2 PV systems here. And now here becomes really interesting. We had then, and here I'm very, very thankful for the EMPA. We had the opportunity to basically move on into all the work that we've had in Winterthur. So we were here again, you see, we were trying this double window. That's what we had there. So now we put it in again. We can measure it when it's in use. And then the EMPA connected us to a manufacturer, a glass manufacturer. They're called Glass Solutions, and they sit in Kreuzlingen. And with them, we tested an upgrade of windows. So this is in my eyes, a huge potential that we haven't even tapped into. So what we did here is that we took these existing panels, and they are like these, you know, double pane windows that are thrown out of every building because they're not good enough anymore, you know, they let out too much energy and so on. So these windows we just took and just added a 3rd pane. This is not like untypical, like in historic construction, this is done sometimes. You have an existing double pane, add a third pane, you add a new, spacer and new gas. And so we put that back in. So this is one upgrade we tested. Another upgrade we tested is that we took basically we cut open. So, you have it's just very simple, right? It's a piece of glass and then it's a spacer, and then it's another piece of glass. So we just cut that open and just the spacer got replaced. So you just add a new spacer, you just add new gas, you put it back in. This is just crazy, right? I mean, this is just opens up a whole new world. And I haven't even thought about that. And the guys in the manufacturing place, they say, this is our standard thing. What was the hardest work for us was to clean the window. This is just insane, right? And this is, for me, it's just awesome. Like, I'm so excited to then also get these results and just see how it then behaves and how the numbers then we will see and we get in. And I'm still hoping that in the next project we can do this. We can take, I don't know, 80 windows and then just repair them just like that. Maybe we don't even have to take them out of a building. We can just maybe take the window out, fix the window, fix it up, and just put it back in. Floors. So we reuse floors. There's certain floors and certain materials we like to reuse. We've always done that, right? Like this massive oak flooring, I mean, this is something that hardly gets thrown away these days because in itself has a value already, and it's usually it's usually salvaged and sold for a lot of money. But it's also, in the time where we are now, I think we have to be much more careful and give much more value and care and interest in material and items that are just not nice yet for us. It's like this floor that they put in like 20 years ago and it's like this a little parquet, but it's like neither this nor that, and we don't really like it. It's something that we would just take out and replace. So we took that was from a building in Dübendorf, one of these other buildings that we could take materials out, and we just played around there. It's just that, look, okay, the upper left, this is just how it came. And then below, it's like, okay, this is what happens when you sand it and oil it. And then on the other ones, we just try to cut it up and just put it in just differently, just so that you just have a playing attitude and just try to combine things differently and change them a bit and just come up with creative ideas that then I think we can find pleasure in and we can have fun with. So this is now a view into the unit, and here we this is also interesting, these tiles. So these are roof tiles that then also our carpenter brought. He said, oh, look, next to me, there's actually somebody who makes roof tiles, and he always has these roof tiles that have little mistakes in them. So he can not put them in the roof. And so we use these tiles that are not good enough for the roof, but they're really good for a wall. And then the plaster we used here was clay, so we can actually dismantle it. And this is also an interesting thing because, as some of you might know, if we have brick and we have brick walls, these days there's a certain time, like after the 60s, it's impossible to separate the mortar and the brick because the mortar is stronger than the brick. So if you try to get the brick and the mortar apart, it's the stone that breaks and not the mortar. So this is just also a thing that we should change. And now you see these blue walls. So that's actually carpet. So we have gotten a lot of carpet from this office building and played around with that. We just cut it up and stacked it and in different ways to experiment with that. And these are basically the walls that you can take out. So this is just a temporary wall. It's just basically put in there. You can take it out, and it's just a material that's that's there, and you just kind of put it there and then you just take it out again. And on the top right is also an interesting story. This person These are these mechanical units. So in the beginning, we were going to have mechanical units all from this one building that was going to be dismantled. But then there was a postpone in the deconstruction, as in the demolition permit. So at some point we had to say, okay, we cannot do that anymore. And then we were going to take new components, and they were ordering those. And then, funny enough, with Corona, we experienced a lot of upheaval this year, also in material price and delivery times. So it ended up that the mechanical unit people said, no, we cannot, sorry, we won't be able to finish in time because we don't get these things. We don't get these units. They're like these mechanical pieces. We cannot, it takes such and such weeks longer. And so then they basically ended up reusing again this time because it was faster. Like they had done a deconstruction. So they used these white things, they were reused. And that guy here, he had a machine where he could plug in these heating and cooling units. So they actually reused the metal and then they upgraded it and we put them in. And now here is now there's Serena. She's our woman in chief for a temporary wall construction with books and magazines. We've spent many hours, especially her, stacking these books and magazines. This is all stuff from the EMPA, by the way. The EMPA has a big library, and these are beautiful books, scientific books from the 60s up. So if you have any interest, at some point it will be dismantled. You can get your fill there. Yeah. Okay. And so now I'm done with our big projects. I'm just gonna, I don't know how much time I still have. I'm gonna just go browse quickly through a few more little things that we do. 5 minutes? Okay. A few more things I'm doing. So this is a project we're working on now in Zurich, and this is Transa. So it's like this outdoor clothing brand, and they want new interiors, and they wanted to combine two offices and so on. And what we tried here was basically to say, okay, how can we just minimize anything that goes in and out of this office? So we tried to do a sort of a zero waste approach, and we came up with a system. It's like a sort of a rochade system. So we start taking things out from here, like dismantle the suspended ceilings and the furniture that needs to go out, and then just basically put it in again on the other end. So it's really the idea to take everything that's there in the site as a resource and try to come up with ways how it can be used. It's not going to work fully, but there are certain things that we're trying there, like some concrete. We're going to use concrete elements that are cut out for new openings and just use them again in interior walls. That the middle, this is basically these plaster suspended ceiling elements that we took down and then cut them and like stack them up to make an interior wall, or furniture or wood elements that we cannot reuse, that are just going to be cut up and stacked together differently to make a different interior. And this is something we are in only partially. Basically, we have been helping them. This is a project that is happening. This is a super exciting project, by the way. This is happening here in Münchenstein. It's an extension of a museum of an energy provider. And they had a competition, and in the competition, the topic of reuse was part. So the team that won, they suggested to build a wood block and make a Faraday, like a Käfig, Faraday, something like a frame outside of the building out of dismantled power masts, which is of course a great idea for an energy provider. So we were then hired to find power masts for them. It was quite an interesting little task, but we managed to get harvest for them or find for them 10 power masts that got dismantled. And now there has started a cooperation with the EPFL where we have, so here we have then categorized these manually because they have already been taking them down. So they were already basically in this thing to be, you know, shipped to, I don't know, somewhere to get melted back down to the material. Anyways, we harvested these beams, we measured them, we made them in a nice table, and then we handed this table to the EPFL. And the EPFL, they have an algorithm where they can take this Excel sheet, and then they can, with this algorithm, they can create new shapes and new forms. So this is super exciting. It has a huge potential in my eyes. And here it's like it's the first thing, as far as I know, where it really will be put in place. So the architects here, they have then gotten a very easy way for them to structure these existing beams and make this sort of cage out of it. So this should happen next year. So this will be very exciting to see. And now we're also tackling, we have been talking about concrete today. We look into really reusing the heavy loads of climate, right? Like the heavy brothers and sisters here. So we look at these steel beams, steel constructions. This goes into new projects now that we're working on. And we're also looking at reusing concrete. And we're currently looking at concrete elements from the 60s. You know, we look at them and we try to basically analyze them. What can they still do? You know, how strong are they still? How high is the, okay, now it gets very technical, but you know, in which context can you actually reuse them? You know, can you dismantle them here and put them there again? Can you use them as foundation, or can you use them as a ceiling? Can you turn them upside down? These are things that I think there's an incredible amount of potential and a lot of research to be done. And it's also an incredible source for us to be creative, to come up with new shapes and just a new language of how we can build. Here, this is Basel. Open call for all. Where is he? Lucas Grunz is here involved. He and the whole team of the Architekturwoche Basel, where it's just running now. It's an open call for a little pavilion that's going to be built next year here in the Dreispitz in Basel. And the idea is to make this pavilion out of reused components. So we are helping to set that up and making a catalog. We're now making a very nice website that has all kinds of materials and amounts and colors and so on, and their footprint and so on. And then the teams are invited to come up with ideas on how this pavilion could look like. And I'm really very excited to see the results that we will be coming in there, because I'm hoping that this, like things like this are just so crucial that we have that now, right? Because this opens up our eyes of all the possibilities and all the combinations and languages and styles and individual ways to approach this topic that will then be, I think, just opening all of our minds of how this really, climate, I don't know, friendly or responsible construction can look like. And now this pavilion doesn't have a lot of, it doesn't need to fulfill a lot of requirements, right? It's going to be there for half a year, but it keeps going. Like this is one. This is the next thing that we're working on right now, is basically a competition that will be launched from the city of Zurich. And what they want to do is that they have an existing recycling center in the city, and it has to move to another place. And they start a competition where they want this new recycling building to be made out of their own materials that belongs to the city of Zurich, that is partially dismantled in this place, but also dismantled in other places, will then be the basic the basic components and the basic materials to go into this next building. And this is just awesome. So this is the end. I don't know, almost the end. I just wanted to say one last thing. I think it's really, I'm very happy to be here. I think it's awesome that this event is happening here. This topic is happening here. I'm hoping to pass on a sort of a spark of interest. I'm hoping that we all can spark this interest in this basically common quest that we have, this big challenge that we have to come up with solutions, to invent solutions for all of us to have a future that is fun and livable, and we can do, I think we can do this together if we want. And I just want to say one last thing, please never underestimate the impact an individual and each individual of us can have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kerstin, for this very inspiring lecture. Are there any questions from the audience?
Thank you very much. I just have a question about the building in Winterthur. You said that the Bauerschaft wanted like something like less expensive, but could you explain that something with reused material is like more expensive than a new building? Because I don't know, it doesn't make sense. And how could we change that?
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it was the first thing was to get them to the point to not think it's going to be cheaper than a new construction, because this is really the first thing that you think, right? It's like it's already all there. How can it be? Pricey? But this is basically the situation we have in Switzerland or worldwide, really. I mean, the material we have is much too cheap, right? Like the material we're using is not, the price of the material we're using is not equivalent to the footprint it has and to the impact it has on the world. So the material is much too cheap. And then you're in Switzerland where the labor is really high. So I think this relationship is different when we look at different countries in the world, but in Switzerland, it's like any move you make, you know, I mean, you can, you know, we have, like people say, you know, you can take this carpet, these blinds, and then you know what it already costs to get somebody to take down these blinds. It's just, you know, so this is the thing that you have then to, you just have to inform, you have to explain that, because it's not a self-given thing. But I think if you can explain it, and if you can explain why it is like that and what the points are that you need to look at, then yeah, you can make it work. And you have to also tell them, look, it's gonna be, you know, these and these prices are going to change, and these planning phases are going to change, and the whole planning process is going to change. But if you address that right in the beginning and you make it very clear so that everybody knows what they're getting themselves into, then I think it can work.
Any other questions? Then I have a question about the same project, or you mentioned it in the same project about the planning process, or the time or amount you need for the planning process. I guess when you have the longer planning process, you probably have less time for building, or how does these two components come together in the end?
I think you do more things in the beginning that you otherwise do later, right? Like in the beginning, it's much sooner than usual. You have to understand the materials, right? Like especially when you work in the structure. Let's say you have the structure, like we see before, like the steel structure. That's like the core of the building. So very early in the process, you need to understand what that means, because this has an impact to your building height, to the whole shape of your building and how you approach it. And then that is basically done early and informs your next steps. And at the same time with the window, right? It's like if you have a window, you want to have it reused, you have to really understand what the qualities are of this window so that you can put it in there. And it's not that you plan as usual plan, and then in the end you just order the window just how you need it, right? It's different. So if you know that for you as a planner, there is certain steps shift earlier in the process, and in the overall you're going to need more time, then if you know it as a planner, and then the building owner knows that, for example, also for him, unusual than in a standard project, much earlier he needs to put in money, because he needs to pay for that steel structure much earlier in the process than usually. So if you understand it, what it means, you can communicate it in the beginning, and then everybody can say yes or no, I'm in or I'm out.
So I just still have one question regarding what Julie also mentioned, since we're talking about circular economy and sort of to close the circle. No, so the economy works, but not quite yet, because probably the demand is not as high, or somehow it's not regulated in Switzerland anyway. Have you thought of different scenarios where this could be implemented in a way that the economy part also works out at the end when you reuse? For instance, we know farmers in Switzerland are subsidized. So I'm just thinking loud now, but could there be a system from the top that would actually facilitate this kind of a reuse of, companies who would actually do this for you? Because we know that now for a while, the labor costs will not change anytime soon for different reasons. Have you thought of different scenarios?
I think there's just different ways how it could go, right? I mean, alone, if you had a fair and just CO2 price, that would already change things big time. So that's one thing. And then the next thing that I think is going to come, and that's also going to change things a lot, is when in the building permit, you also have to basically make your calculation on the footprint of the construction of a building and not just of running it. And this is basically overdue, right? But it's going to come in a few years. I mean, now we need to understand that a new construction, basically the footprint of this new construction is over the lifetime of the building several numbers higher than actually the running of, like, the operation of this building, because the operation is you almost don't need any more energy now these days, right? I mean, and then if you use any, it's renewable. And that's a very different situation than in the production of materials. We heard it before. I mean, a cement or a brick. I mean, it's over 1,000 degrees of heat you need to actually make this material. I mean, and this is go away from fossil fuels there. I mean, that's a much harder task. So I think these things are overdue, and they will come, and maybe they come too slowly. And so what we think is, don't wait, just do it, just go ahead and do it. Because if you start creating the demand, all the other stuff is going to happen.
I guess this was a very good last word for this first part of our part 2.